Welcome back, everyone. It's been a little bit since we've done one of these, so we've got a decent amount of stuff to run down that we're going to talk about, and we're going to start with our one of the most recent officer-involved shootings. This was one that happened up kind of in north central Austin, over off 183 in kind of the Lamar area, and it was a pretty gnarly one. It was one that could have gone a lot differently, and highlights a number of different things that we just kind of wanted to talk about. But, the video was just released, last week, and it showed, right? It starts out as officers that go to stop a vehicle. They find it's a stolen vehicle, and they go to stop it. The vehicle takes off, get into a pursuit, and they're going, down the roadway. You can hear a lot of the radio updates. You can hear that they're giving direction to travel, speed, traffic. They're, describing what he's doing, which is standard protocol. That's what we do. So that way there's a supervisor that's listening to the radio. And if they, hear something that's concerning, that they can address. But they're giving good updates. They're doing a good job. And then once they get close to Lamar is where he'd already hit one barrier and then crashed out into another car and then spins around and is facing them. So then they're pulling up, and as they're pulling up, you can see just particles from that. You can see him point the gun, and then all of a sudden he just starts unloading at the officers. Very clearly the attempt to shoot them. And so the officers are forced, they wind up bailing out of the car. Some of them are taking rounds as they're trying to get out of the car, and they're returning fire. And then ultimately, right, they have shots fired. They're still giving updates over the radio. They're saying what happened, shots fired, shots taken, which is updates that happen when an officer is receiving fire versus if they're the ones that are shooting. So they're giving all these updates, and then they reassemble themselves after the gunfire is over. They reassemble themselves, and they start giving commands. They get the guy out of the car, and they still get him detained, and they treat him for the gunshot wound. And then they're able to secure the rest of the car and finish out kind of the whole scene. But it's pretty ironic because, I don't know about ironic, but it was very telling because one of the things we had just talked about on social media anyway that I posted about was an incident that happened in a rural county in Texas where this exact same thing happened, where an officer got shot at like 6 or 8 times. It was a deputy, I believe, got shot at 6 or 8 times, and it was a bulletproof windshield that saved him because it was all right at the driver's seat. And fortunately, in this instance, no officers were hurt, but we don't have those kinds of things here. Like our vehicles, these officers didn't have that protection. So this very easily could have gone another way, and shows how quickly situations can change and the seriousness of the job and how dangerous it is. Like any one of those officers could have been hit, but fortunately they were on top of it. They stayed in control. They handled business and ultimately got him detained still, and now I believe he's still in jail.
Sure. And you got to think about somebody taking 10 to 15 rounds. I mean, an average firearm holds 15 rounds in a magazine. I didn't count exactly how many rounds are coming out the window, but you got someone firing that many shots in your direction. Mm-hmm. And these officers, I believe there were like 6 involved, for, firing a regular lethal weapon, and then 2 with some less lethal weapons. But these officers only have less than a couple of years of experience. And under that type of pressure, for them to take rounds, return fire, form a team, and then take them into custody without any other bad thing happening is just amazing.
Yeah. And they did a great job because, like I said, by my count, just looking at the spray from the windshield, it was about a dozen rounds that he fired out of the vehicle. Just from counting there, obviously that there could be more that came out, but at least 12 rounds it looks like. And they're all young officers. Patrol, evening and night shift in particular, tends to be young patrol officers because that's where you first get assigned, and they're trying to go out there and prevent things from happening. They're trying to recover somebody's property, and usually when someone starts evading, there's a lot more than just one thing going on. And then we come to find out about this guy in that he's 18 years old and already doing this kind of stuff. And it looked like, looking through his history, like, obviously juvenile records are sealed, so you don't really know much about what was going on there. But he already had several misdemeanor cases, some of them of which had been dismissed. One of them that I believe he was on like deferred adjudication for, which was an assault, and he had like a violation of bond. He had family violence where he had assaulted a family member, like all of this stuff going on. And then we're already out here shooting at cops.
Right. And we're not even going to talk about juvenile records because we don't know.
Yeah. We don't know anything about that, but we can say, just in general, speaking very generally, and it came out in one of the in the chief's press conference talking about this, how prolific juvenile crime is and how the vast majority of stolen vehicles, it seems like, involves juveniles. And we had some recently that were murder cases where you're talking about 12, 13, 16, 17-year-olds that are committing these pretty heinous crimes and are involved in extremely risky behavior.
Right. Robberies, homicides, and they all involve stolen vehicles. So I know that some people get upset that there's pursuits involving stolen vehicles, but you have to wonder, what is somebody doing with the stolen vehicle? And our officers have the experience to know that stolen vehicles are used to go do other crimes.
Yes.
Like you don't just have a stolen vehicle usually. You don't just carry a gun in a stolen vehicle usually.
Well, and that's come out in several things where one of the links that they found to, I can't remember if it was a robbery series or a homicide, but it involved stolen vehicle. Like they had stolen a car and were using that to hopscotch around, and that was what they were using. I believe it was a robbery series, but it just shows a lot of the dangers yet again that officers face. And that kind of leads into one of the other things that we wanted to talk about, which is the thing that frustrates officers. One of the other things, we talk about a lot of officer frustrations here, but here we are. We have an incident where officers were being shot at, and ultimately this guy was arrested. But we had another case a couple weeks ago where officers go to a home, they go to respond to a call, and they can kind of hear something's going on. And when the door opens, a suspect inside winds up chunking a large glass object at an officer, hits the officer in the face, causes significant injury, and ultimately the officers still do their job. They still wind up, securing the scene. They wind up getting the suspect in custody and arresting him, and that suspect gets booked for aggravated assault on a peace officer, which is a first-degree felony.
It's punishable between 5 and 99?
Yep, 5 and 99 years. So up to 99 years in prison, and originally gets a $100,000 bond. And I believe also was arrested for another misdemeanor as well. But then, like 4 days later, gets arrested, and then 4 days later, that bond gets lowered from $100,000 to $10,000. A 90% reduction in the bond amount, and shock and awe, what happened? He bonded out.
Right, because you don't actually have to come up with the $10,000. Well, you have to do 10% of the $1,000 it was lowered to. So
yeah, and I mean, and we're not talking about like, oh, it's a candle that hit the officer and a scratch there. No, like it was a significant like orbital fracture.
Right.
That caused significant injury. The officer had to have surgery. Like there was a lot of medical care that was involved initially. Spent an extended amount of time in the hospital, and
they're still going to need plastic surgery.
Yes.
It's going to affect their life forever.
Yeah, it's huge, a major life-changing injury. And I mean, props on the original judge who set this, right? $100,000, like, I mean, in fairness, our opinion, could have been higher. Yeah, sure. But $100,000 is a significant bond.
Right. Nobody can usually come up with that amount.
Yeah, that's a significant amount, and is at least more representative of the crime that was committed.
Sure.
But then to lower it to $10,000 is just a slap in the face to officers that go out there, are having things thrown at them, being shot at, and all this other violent behavior that's going on where, I mean, we've had it in the past where officers they get hit by cars. People try to intentionally run them over. We have officers that, they have been shot at numerous different times, but people actively resist them. People throw glass at them. People throw all kinds of stuff, broken glass, try to cut them, try to stab them, try to do all kinds of violent things. And here we catch somebody, but the judge just lowers it to where it's like, nah, it's not that big of a deal, when it is a big deal. It's a huge ordeal, not just because a violent felon accused of a first-degree felony violent felon has been released, but like, they're now out free and there's no accountability. And the officer is like, okay, they're still going to recover. They're still recovering.
Right. The prosecutors and judges that are supposed to be keeping the community safe aren't doing that.
No. And in this particular incident, like I said, it looks like the original judge set it at $100,000, and then a separate judge came in and lowered it. Looks like that judge was Judge Karen Sage, was the one who reduced the bond. So it's just so frustrating to see all of this and demoralizing for officers because, again, it's like, okay, well, what value is assigned to our work, to our well-being, to officers' livelihood, their ability to be safe in what they're doing? Even though we know it's a dangerous job, but if it's not, like, if something's going to happen, knowing that accountability is going to be there for the person that clearly had no regard for the officer, but that is not happening. So, another thing that happened last week, I believe it was a lot of discussions around license plate readers.
Right. And I think that comes into play when we're talking about stolen vehicles and what people are doing in stolen vehicles or doing crimes in different cars.
Well, and that was part of what came out. Like, if you're listening to one of the work sessions, is when Assistant Chief Askew and Chief Davis were there, and they were talking about how LPRs had been used to identify people who were suspected of murder within mere hours. And we had other ones where it was a robbery series, and part of that robbery series is the one that I believe it came out related to the stolen vehicle being used, and then being able to use the license plate reader hits in order to find the suspect. And then it's been used to recover missing endangered children. It's been used in a variety of different instances, especially with a lot of the violent robbery series is where it's super helpful, but also homicides. Like, there's so many things that it is helpful on. And it was up for renewal. It did get pulled from the agenda while city management continues to review. And the biggest issues that came out about it was the fear of how it was going to be used, in particular, not so much by APD, but by ICE and by federal government, by other entities that may have access to it, and then the company itself, Flock.
And those arguments, were known about, when city council first introduced this in our last city council. They said, hey, we have these concerns. Let's develop a policy to make sure it's not being shared, that everything is going to be maintained securely by Austin Police, and that we're going to keep record of everything that's going on. And APD came around and did everything they asked to have this helpful crime-fighting tool, only for them to yank it away with those same fears that they articulated the first time around.
Yeah. And, our hope, our fear really is that, like, the program is going to get yanked, and something's going to happen where these would have been a critical tool in bringing justice to someone whose life has been taken, and finding someone who's missing or their life is in danger, and in preventing future crimes. Because I think a lot of it is, like, a lot of the concerns that are brought up, like you just talked about, they're solvable. Like, all of this is solvable to where it was no need to have this big of a concern around the program as a whole. Like, the concerns could be addressed. And for us to be at this space now is just, it's kind of, I use frustrating a lot, I feel like, but it's just, that's the mentality of the department right now. Like, we're trying so hard to build our department back.
And keep our community safe.
And keep our community safe, and to be able to provide the level of service that we want to be able to provide to our city. But there are so many barriers being put in the way to us being able to achieve that goal.
And it might be a coincidence that they all happen, but it seems pretty intentional when you keep building on one after another after another. And we all join this job to keep the community safe. That's everybody's goal here.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, when we've got a tool that could help make sure that victims aren't experiencing crime in the future, like, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you keep your community safe as an elected official around here?
Mm-hmm. So, and it kind of plays into another thing that's going on right now that is very reminiscent of things we've seen in the past. It's starting in LA. It's going on there, and we've heard of some events here in Austin. where there are these immigration policy, protests, borderline riots that are going on out in LA, it seems like. We haven't had any here yet, but we've been down this road before. We
have. It starts somewhere else and it might pop up here.
Mm-hmm. And where we are today compared to back in 2020 when this first all came around, we have serious staffing struggles now. We are still 350, probably more officers short from where we were when this came around the first time. So our staffing levels are down in large part due to how policing was politicized, in particular in areas where it was not, like, it wasn't directly tied to what had happened elsewhere in the country. But we're wandering back into that same space, it seems like. And it's concerning because people seem to forget and we become easy targets where law enforcement, we're there to keep the peace. We're there to maintain order. We're there to allow people to peaceably exercise their First Amendment rights. But that comes with certain expectations in that you not impede or infringe on other people's rights.
Right.
Like which is what we saw last go round, where it was not always peaceful.
And this one's similar. The last one, something bad happened in a different city and people protested here. Had nothing to do with anything we did, our police did. And this one's similar. This is protests related to immigration and customs enforcement. And our policy really doesn't get involved in immigration too much. We don't question people's status here. When we're running across victims and witnesses, we don't ask these questions. So it's not something we're involved in. But if people start throwing bricks at cars or setting things on fire or blocking freeways when ambulances need to get to the hospital, we're going to be forced then to make sure that our community is safe.
Mm-hmm. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And like you just said, we're not the ones that make these policies, right? APD did not come up with immigration policy. We have our own internal policies, which does not focus on status at all. They're not questions that we ask. That's not things that we get into because that's not our area of responsibility. Like, our job is to take care of crimes within Austin, to work with victims, to work with witnesses, and to hold suspects accountable when it comes to criminal activity according to Texas state law. We are not federal law enforcement officers. That is not our job. But when people protest against those things, when people want to go and express their opinions about those things, and they wander outside of that First Amendment realm, is where we're the ones responsible for responding and restoring order and peace to make sure that everybody else can continue to exercise their freedom as well, and to make sure that everyone else can go about their lives unimpeded. So it's, again, we've been here before.
Yeah. Well, it seems like this is another make it or break it moment.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said that we're in a staffing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
You've cited in just this podcast numerous issues where officers are just feeling, as you say, frustrated for one reason or another. And we're at this point where if something else bad happens, our staffing crisis is going to get even worse. And what message do you have for politicians?
Well, that's exactly what I was about to wander into, is we've seen in the past how politicians are very quick to blame law enforcement, to blame APD, to blame officers, and I would like to believe we're getting to a better position and a better spot where we've seen more support. We've been able to work with them more. In particular on the local level, the state has historically been very supportive of law enforcement. And so I truly hope we don't wander backwards in time and winding up dealing with a lot of the same issues. But politicians, elected officials, have to be very conscious that their words and their statements have a dramatic impact on what can happen, and they can have consequences. And too often we saw it earlier this year with some, not everybody, I'm not trying to lump all the council into it, but some we saw with, they see a video and they instantly judge the department, and, we're going to look into this, and the department is wrong, and this is off and that's off, which is nonsense. And at the end of the day, they were all wrong because the department the officer did what they were supposed to do. And so you can't be just putting things out there because it feels good. You can't instantly vilify the department because, that's what people may want to see, because they're typically small groups, right? Like we do tend to see people who do want to feel safe in their community. They want to have law and order. They want to make sure that the law is enforced, and all of that comes with a balance. But it is a word of caution to every elected official out there. Watch what you say. Because if you decide to overly politicize this and you decide to go after law enforcement because that's a politically expedient thing to do, there are consequences to those actions. We're a department that is trying to recover from a lot of what happened in 2020, a lot of what's happened around policing over the last, 7 years or so. And continuing to go after law enforcement when we are enforcing the rules and the laws that they wrote and they told us to go and enforce, but then you don't like the way that we enforce it, like, that's not your lane.
And then you go and indict 19 officers and
Yeah.
keep them on the hook for 600 some odd days and not have any reason to do it. And you just drop the charges up. Didn't even say we're sorry.
No, they just, we're just going to forget that one happened and move right on along.
Yeah, we got that feather in our cap and, we'll just leave it there.
Yeah. That's the concern. Put yourself in these officers' shoes, right? Again, looking at everything that's happened. They've had guns pointed at them, shot at. They've had things thrown at them, seriously injured. Their lives,
cocktails.
Yep, their lives impacted forever. All on the fresh heels of knowing that 5 years ago that we had too many officers become targets politically, and then they became indicted, and then some are still on the hook for that right now, and they're still going through it. What message are you sending that people should come here to Austin? What message are you sending to people that want to be officers here if you choose to politicize policing just because it's the expedient argument to do? I haven't seen anybody here do it yet, but this is a warning now. If you go down that road, there are consequences to it. This cannot be a repeat. Like, let our chief do her job. Let our chief make sure that everybody is safe and respond appropriately, and that's exactly what the department will do. But this nonsense that we had 5 years ago, this is no time to be repeating that. And I truly hope we've moved to a new space with it all. But if not, again, we have a repeat. Like, there's going to be a heavy price to pay for that one.
Sure.
So, that's all we got for you this go round. We'll be back again. Who knows when? We're just kind of doing things as stuff comes up. So if you have anything that you want us to talk about, as always, please feel free to reach out to us. But other than that, y'all be safe, stay alert, and stay tuned for the next one.